I'm about to tell you a story so beautiful it cuts, so true it leaves bruises. It happened where the mountains meet the sky, and the law meets nothing at all, on a lonely spread of land that belonged to a woman who would rather die than let it go. It began with a shadow at the fence line on the shortest day of the year. One man, one knife, one quiet offer of help, and one glance that neither of them could ever take back. One blizzard. One lie that became truth. One grave that still watches over what they built from ashes. Before we ride this trail together, please tap like and drop a comment. Where are you tuning in from this evening? The late afternoon sun hung low over the Harlan Ranch, bleeding orange across the dry New Mexico hills. Dust devils spun lazy across the yard, kicking up grit that stung Kate Harlan's cheeks as she stood on the weathered porch. The boards creaked under her boots, the only sound besides the low, constant moan of wind through the pines. 3 months since they'd buried Patrick Harlan in the hard, red earth behind the barn, and the silence still felt wrong. Like the house was holding its breath, waiting for his voice to boom from the stables. Kate's copper hair whipped across her face. She tucked a strand behind her ear with a calloused hand, eyes fixed on the distant ridge where the mountains turned purple in the fading light. The ranch stretched out before her, vast and empty, corrals sagging at the corners, the windmill groaning with every gust, the cattle thinned by drought and wolves. She could feel the weight of it all pressing on her ribs. Patrick's dream, her inheritance, her prison. She didn't hear him approach. When she finally sensed the stillness change, she turned slowly. A man stood beside the corral fence, motionless as stone. Tall, broad-shouldered copper skin catching the last of the sun. Long black hair hung straight past his shoulders, tied with a single strip of leather. Buckskin leggings, a faded blue shirt that had once belonged to someone else. No rifle in sight, only the knife at his hip. He watched her the way a hawk watches a rabbit. Not hungry, not angry, just patient. Kate's right hand drifted toward the Winchester leaning against the porch rail. Her fingers brushed the stock, but she didn't lift it. Not yet. The wind tugged at his hair. He didn't blink. She swallowed once, tasting dust and fear. 3 months alone had taught her how fast a stranger could turn a quiet afternoon into something bloody. But 3 months alone had also taught her how fast winter could kill without help. She stepped off the porch, boots crunching gravel. The rifle stayed where it was, but close enough she could reach it in 2 strides. He didn't move as she approached. 20 feet. 15. 10. When she stopped, the smell of leather and pine smoke reached her. His eyes were dark, unreadable, but not cruel. "What do you want?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Work." One word, low and even, English perfect but edged with something older. "Food? Shelter? Winter coming?" Kate studied him. High cheekbones, the faint scar along his jaw, the way he stood, balanced, ready, but not threatening. Apache. She knew the look. Everyone in Cielo Rojo knew the look these days. "You're a long way from any reservation," she said. He gave the smallest nod. "I know these mountains, horses, cattle, fix fences, hunt. You need hands before snow buries the pass." She almost laughed, short, bitter. "And why would I hire an Apache when half the town thinks your people are burning homesteads?" His gaze never wavered. "Because I'm here, and I'm not burning anything." Silence stretched between them, thick as the dust settling on her boots. Kate felt the old anger rise. Patrick's voice in her head warning her about trusting strangers, Sarah's letters begging her to sell and move to Santa Fe. But the corrals were empty of help. The barn roof leaked, and the first hard freeze was already biting the air at night. She glanced past him toward the horizon. A thin line of dust rose there, too far to make out riders, but close enough to tighten her stomach. Army patrol. Or Baxter's men. Or worse. She looked back at him. Those dark eyes held hers without flinching. "Why here?" she asked again, quieter this time. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned his head, just enough to follow the same line of dust she'd seen. When he spoke, his voice was almost gentle. "Because no one else will take me." The wind picked up, rattling the loose boards on the stable. Kate felt the chill slide under her coat, down her spine. She could send him away now, tell him to keep walking, let the cold or the soldiers take him. Or she could open the gate, let him in, and pray she hadn't just invited ruin onto her porch. Her fingers flexed at her sides. No tremble. Not yet. She stepped aside. "There's a cot in the tack room," she said. "One night. We talk terms in the morning." He inclined his head. Not a bow, just acknowledgement. Then he walked past her toward the barn, boots silent on the dirt, carrying nothing but the knife and the weight of whatever had driven him here. Kate stayed where she was, watching his back until he disappeared into the lengthening shadows. The dust on the horizon had thickened, a faint haze now, moving closer. She wrapped her arms around herself against the sudden cold. Somewhere far off, a hawk screamed once, sharp and lonely. The wind answered, and the ranch held its breath a little longer. The kitchen smelled of old coffee grounds and pine smoke, the kind that clung to everything after a long day. The oil lamp on the table threw jittery shadows across the rough-hewn walls, making the room feel smaller than it was. Kate sat at one end of the scarred pine table, spine straight, hands folded on the wood. Across from her, Nietzsche occupied the other chair like he belonged there, calm, unhurried, elbows resting lightly on the edge. Between them lay 2 rifles. Hers, the Winchester Patrick had taught her to clean at 12. His, the old Springfield he'd carried in without a word. They weren't pointed at anyone. They didn't need to be. The wind had picked up outside, rattling the shutters like impatient fingers. Every gust carried the promise of worse to come. Kate hadn't offered him coffee. She wasn't sure she wanted to, but the pot was still warm on the stove, and the silence had stretched long enough that she finally pushed a tin cup toward him. Black. No sugar. He took it without comment, fingers brushing the handle like he was handling something fragile. "You eat yet?" she asked, voice low. He shook his head once. "Not since morning." She rose, slow, like moving too fast might shatter something. From the iron pot on the back burner, she ladled out a bowl of beans and cornbread. Plain, but hot. She set it in front of him, then sat again, watching. He ate without hurry. No sound but the scrape of spoon against tin, and the wind trying to get in. Kate's eyes kept drifting to the rifles, then to his hands, strong, scarred across the knuckles, steady. She hated how much she noticed. Hated more how much she needed to notice. The barn roof still leaked in 3 places. The north fence had 3 broken posts she couldn't lift alone. Winter was already nipping at the heels of October, and the cattle were down to half what they'd been last spring. She cleared her throat. "You said you know horses, cattle, fences." He nodded, swallowing the last bite. "I do." "And you know the mountains better than most white men around here." Another nod. No boast, just fact. She leaned forward slightly. "Then why aren't you with your people?" His spoon paused halfway to the bowl. For the first time since he'd walked through her gate, something flickered behind those dark eyes. something old and tired. He set the spoon down carefully. "Some things make it hard to stay," he said. "Some things make it hard to go back." Kate waited. He didn't offer more. The wind slammed the shutters again, louder this time. She glanced toward the window. Beyond the glass, the sky had gone the color of wet slate. Snow already dusted the porch rail in thin white lines. "Snow early this year," Nietzsche said quietly, following her gaze. She felt the words settle in her stomach like lead. Early snow meant early isolation. No hands from town, no supplies if the pass closed, no mercy from the cold. She looked back at him. "You think it'll be bad?" "I know it will." Silence again. Thicker now. Kate's fingers tightened on the edge of the table. She hated this part most. The moment when pride had to bend. Patrick had raised her to stand alone, to shoot straight, to never ask. But Patrick wasn't here anymore, and the ranch didn't care about pride. It cared about surviving. She'd already let him sleep in the tack room last night. One night. That's what she'd told herself. One night, and she'd send him on his way at dawn. But dawn had come and gone, and he was still here, eating her food, sitting at her table, looking at her like he saw past the armor she wore every day. The thought made her cheeks burn. Nietzsche lifted his eyes. The lamp caught the copper in his skin, the faint sheen of sweat along his temple from the heat of the stove. His gaze drifted, slow, deliberate, to the spill of her red hair across her shoulder, lit like fire under the yellow glow. "Firebird," he said softly. "Fierce, not easily tamed." The words landed like a hand on her arm. Unexpected, warm, too close. Kate felt heat climb her neck. She turned her face away, staring at the wall where Patrick's old hat still hung on its peg, dusty and forgotten. "Don't," she said, sharper than she meant. He didn't apologize. He didn't look away either. She stood abruptly, chair scraping back. "You can stay tonight, in the tack room again, but come morning, we decide. No promises." He rose too, slower, taller in the low-ceilinged room. "No promises?" he echoed. She moved to the stove, turning her back to him, pretending to check the fire. Her hands shook, just a little, when she gripped the poker. She hated that he'd seen it, hated more that he hadn't commented. Outside, the wind rose to a low howl. And then, faint but unmistakable, the rhythmic thud of hooves on frozen ground. Not one horse, several. Coming closer. Kate froze. Nietzsche was already at the window, one hand on the frame, peering into the dark. The lamp threw his shadow long across the floorboards. "They come sooner than you think," he said, voice flat. Kate crossed to the door in 3 strides, lifted the Winchester from its hooks beside the jamb. The metal was cold against her palms. She thumbed the hammer back with a soft metallic click. The hoofbeats grew louder. Steady. Purposeful. She glanced at Nietzsche. He hadn't moved for a weapon. He simply watched the night, face unreadable. "Whoever they are," she said, voice barely above a whisper, "they're not stopping." The wind carried the sound of men's voices now, low, clipped, official. Kate's finger rested lightly on the trigger guard. The ranch felt suddenly very small and very alone. The corral was a ghost in the gray dawn. Thick fog rolled off the mountains like smoke from a dying fire, swallowing the fence posts and turning the world soft and treacherous. Kate stepped out onto the porch with a tin mug of coffee gone cold in her hand, breath fogging the air. The cold bit at her knuckles, sharp and familiar. She'd barely slept. Every creak of the house had sounded like footsteps, every gust like a warning. She saw him before she heard him. Nietzsche stood in the middle of the corral, coatless despite the chill, sleeves rolled to his elbows. A wiry bay mustang, wild-eyed and half-feral, circled him at the end of a long lead rope. The horse snorted, ears pinned, hooves kicking up puffs of frost-dusted dirt. Kate had tried to break that same animal 3 weeks earlier. It had thrown her twice, left a bruise the color of storm clouds across her ribs, and taught her the limits of her own strength. Now the mustang slowed, stopped, lowered its head. Nietzsche didn't speak, didn't yank the rope. He simply stood, weight balanced, letting the horse feel the quiet between them. When the bay finally stepped closer, Nietzsche lifted one hand, slow, open, and the animal nosed his palm like it had known him all its life. Kate's grip tightened on the mug until the tin creaked. She hated how easy he made it look, hated the way the horse responded to him when it had fought her every inch. This was her land, her corral, her blood in the dirt from every fall she'd taken trying to prove she could do it alone. And here he was, stranger, Apache, whatever he truly was, making her feel small in the one place she'd always been enough. She set the mug down on the rail with deliberate care and walked to the fence. The mustang flicked an ear toward her but didn't bolt. Nietzsche glanced up, eyes meeting hers across the mist. No smile, no triumph, just that steady, unreadable look that made her want to look away and stare harder at the same time. "You're up early," she said. "So are you." She nodded toward the horse. "He threw me last month, nearly broke my arm." Nietzsche ran a hand along the bay's neck, slow strokes. "He remembers fear. You gave him yours. Now he's giving you his trust." Kate felt heat rise in her chest. Anger, embarrassment, something sharper she couldn't name. "You think I don't know how to handle my own stock?" "I think you know exactly how hard it is," he said quietly. "That's why you're angry." She opened her mouth, closed it. The words stuck like burrs. Before she could answer, the sound of hooves cut through the fog, steady, official. A single rider emerging from the white like a shadow taking shape. Deputy Jace Ryder, hat low, coat collar turned up against the damp. He reined in at the gate, eyes flicking from Kate to Nietzsche to the horse, then back again. "Morning, Miss Harlan," Jace said, voice carrying that careful politeness lawmen used when they weren't sure whose side they were on yet. "Deputy," Kate straightened. "Early for a social call." "Not social." Jace swung down, boots crunching frost. He kept one hand near his holster, casual but not careless. "Sheriff Calder sent me. Word from the fort. Jicarilla slipping out of the reservation again. Small bands. Raiding north of here. He said keep that rifle loaded and your eyes open." Kate felt the air change, thin and brittle. She didn't look at Nietzsche, but she felt him still, motionless beside the Mustang, listening. "Appreciate the warning," she said. "We're managing." Jace's gaze slid past her to Nietzsche. The deputy's jaw tightened, just a fraction. "New hand?" Kate's pulse kicked hard against her ribs. She could tell the truth now. "Say the words. He's Apache. He showed up yesterday. I don't know him. Send him away before trouble follows." But the Mustang was standing quiet under Nietzsche's hand. The barn roof still leaked. And Winter wasn't waiting for her to decide she trusted someone. She swallowed once. "Hired a Mexican hand a few days back. Good with horses. Keeps to himself." The lie tasted like iron on her tongue. First one she'd told since Patrick died. It sat heavy in her stomach. Jace studied Nietzsche a long moment. The Apache met his eyes without flinching, expression blank as stone. "Mexican, huh?" Jace said finally. He spat to the side, a small gesture that said he didn't believe it but wasn't ready to call her on it. "Well, Long as he's working and not causing trouble. But if you see anything, tracks, smoke, anything, send word to town. Sheriff's worried." "I will." Jace mounted up again, touched his hat brim. "Stay safe, Kate. Your pa wouldn't want you out here alone." He turned his horse and disappeared back into the fog. Silence returned, thicker than before. Kate didn't move. She felt Nietzsche watching her, felt it like heat on the back of her neck. When she finally turned, he was already walking the Mustang toward the far rail, but his eyes lifted to hers across the distance. No accusation, no gratitude, just understanding. He knew exactly what she'd done. And why. She looked away first. By noon the fog had burned off, leaving the sky a hard, cold blue. Kate worked the rest of the morning in the barn, mending harness, trying to shake the knot in her chest. Every creak of leather reminded her of the lie she'd told. Every shadow in the rafters felt like eyes watching. She stepped outside just as the first flake drifted past. Fat, slow, white against the dark pines. Then another. And another. Nietzsche appeared at the corral gate, coat on now, hat pulled low. The Mustang followed him like a dog. He looked up at the sky, flakes catching in his black hair. "Cattle in high pasture," he said. "Must bring down tonight." Kate followed his gaze. The clouds had thickened to slate, rolling in fast from the north. She knew that color, knew what it meant. She also knew what it would cost to ride into those hills after dark with a storm coming. Broken legs, lost stock, lost men. Women, too. Her ankle still ached from the last time she'd pushed too hard. She met his eyes. "Tonight?" "Tonight," he repeated, "or we lose half the herd by spring." The wind picked up, carrying the first real bite of winter. Kate felt the old fear coil in her gut. The fear of failing Patrick, of losing the ranch, of being the reason it all fell apart. She nodded once. "Get the horses saddled," she said. "We ride at dusk." Nietzsche didn't smile. He simply turned back to the corral. But as he walked away, Kate saw the way his shoulders tightened, just a fraction, against the coming storm. And the snow kept falling, soft and relentless, covering the tracks they would soon leave behind. The high pasture was a black void when they rode out. No moon, no stars, just the wind screaming down from the peaks, driving snow sideways like needles. Kate's mare fought the bit, ears flat, hooves slipping on the frozen ground already turning white. She leaned low over the saddle horn, scarf pulled tight across her nose and mouth, eyes narrowed against the sting. The cold clawed through her coat, her gloves, straight to the bone. Nietzsche rode ahead, a dark shape cutting through the whiteout, his horse steady where hers balked. He hadn't spoken since they left the corral. Just pointed north once, then kicked his mount into a lope. Kate followed because there was nothing else to do. The herd had scattered when the first hard gust hit. She could hear them lowing somewhere ahead. Panic, not hunger. Cattle didn't understand blizzards. They only knew fear. The wind swallowed their voices. She tried shouting once. "Nietzsche!" But the sound died inches from her lips. She tasted snow and iron, felt the ache in her jaw from clenching her teeth. Patrick's voice echoed in her head, old and rough. "Never chase stock in the dark, Katie. You'll lose more than you save." She'd laughed then. Now the memory burned. They pushed higher. The trail narrowed to a knife edge along the ridge. Kate's mare stumbled, recovered. She patted the neck, more for herself than the horse, muttering, "Easy, girl, easy." The words felt useless. A shape loomed ahead. The herd, bunched against a rock outcrop, backs to the storm. Nietzsche circled wide, trying to turn them south. Kate swung to the left flank, whip cracking the air. The cattle bawled, reluctant, hooves churning snow into mud. For a moment she thought they had them, thought the wind might ease, the night might relent. Then the gust came. It hit like a fist. Snow blinded her. The mare reared, front legs pawing empty air. Kate grabbed mane, leather, anything. Too late. The saddle twisted. She fell hard, shoulder first into the drift, breath punched out of her lungs. The mare bolted, reins snapping free. She lay there a second, stunned, snow filling her mouth. Pain bloomed in her right ankle, sharp, hot, wrong. She tried to stand. The leg buckled. She bit down on a cry, tasting blood. The wind howled louder. The herd's bawling faded, carried away. Nietzsche's voice, distant, torn. "Kate!" She crawled to her knees, dragging the bad leg. Snow soaked through her coat, her shirt, cold as death. She knew what happened to people caught out here. Found frozen stiff come spring, faces turned to the sky like they were still looking for the trail home. She thought of Patrick's grave behind the barn. Thought of Sarah's letters, unread in the drawer. Thought of the ranch, empty now, doors banging in the wind, corrals filling with drifts. All of it gone if she didn't move. She crawled toward a low rock ledge, anything to break the wind. Her hands went numb. Her thoughts slowed. She curled against the stone, knees to chest, scarf slipping. The cold pressed in, heavy, almost gentle. She closed her eyes. A hand gripped her shoulder. She jerked, gasping. Nietzsche knelt over her, snow crusting his hair, his eyelashes. His face was close, too close, breath warm against her cheek. He didn't speak, just slid one arm under her knees, the other behind her back, and lifted her like she weighed nothing. She tried to protest. "The cattle!" But her teeth chattered too hard. He carried her through the white hell. She felt the rhythm of his stride, the heat of his chest through layers of wet wool. Her head fell against his shoulder. She smelled pine smoke on his coat. Faint sweat. Something earthy and alive. For the first time in months, the cold didn't feel like the only thing touching her. He found the horses. Hers spooked but waiting, his steady as stone. He set her in the saddle, mounted behind, arms bracketing her body to keep her upright. One hand held the reins, the other wrapped firm around her waist. She leaned back into him, too exhausted to pretend strength. His heartbeat thudded against her spine, steady, stubborn. The ride back blurred. Snow stung her face. Her ankle throbbed with every jolt. She drifted in and out, aware only of his warmth, the creak of leather, the low murmur he made to the horses when they faltered. They reached the house sometime after midnight. The porch light was out. Kate hadn't thought to leave it burning, but Nietzsche kicked the door open with his boot, carried her inside. The warmth hit like a slap. He set her on the rug before the hearth, knelt and built the fire up fast. Flames snapped, throwing orange across the room. Her clothes were soaked through. She shivered violently, teeth knocking. Nietzsche didn't hesitate. "Wet clothes off," he said, voice low but firm. "Or you die." She stared at him, cheeks burning despite the cold. You can't." He turned away, giving her his back, and pulled a quilt from the chair. "I won't look." She fumbled with buttons, fingers clumsy. Coat, shirt, trousers, the wet fabric peeled away like skin. She wrapped the quilt around herself, shivering harder now that the cold air touched bare skin. Nietzsche turned back, eyes on her face only. He knelt again, lifted the quilt just enough to see her ankle. Swollen, purple, already bruising. He touched it gently, testing. She hissed through her teeth. "Not broken," he said. "Bad sprain. Needs wrapping." He fetched strips of clean cloth from the kitchen, wound them tight around her foot and ankle. His hands were careful, almost tender. When he finished, he pulled the quilt back over her legs and added wood to the fire. Kate watched him move. Efficient, quiet, no wasted motion. The flames lit the planes of his face, the scar on his jaw, the faint lines at the corners of his eyes. She thought of the lie she'd told Jace that morning. Thought of the ranch, still standing because he was here. He sat back on his heels, watching the fire. "You didn't have to come back for the cattle?" she whispered. Nige looked at her then, really looked. "Your land," he said simply. "Your fight." The words settled between them, heavy as the quilt across her lap. The fire popped. Outside, the storm raged on, wind clawing at the walls. Kate pulled the quilt tighter. Her ankle throbbed. Her heart beat too fast. Neither of them moved. The flames danced, throwing long shadows across the floorboards. And somewhere in the dark, beyond the windows, the night kept falling, colder than before. The fire in the hearth had burned low, a steady red glow that pushed back the chill, but never quite reached the corners of the room. Kate sat in Patrick's old armchair, right leg propped on a stool, ankle wrapped thick in strips of clean linen. The swelling had gone down some, but every shift of weight sent a dull throb up her calf. She stared into the flames, watching sparks drift upward like dying stars. 3 days since the storm. 3 days of quiet that felt heavier than the snow piled against the windows. Nige had kept the place running, fed the stock, chopped wood, mended the barn door she'd meant to fix last fall. He moved through the house like a shadow, never loud, never in the way, but always there. She hated how much she noticed, hated how the silence between them had started to feel like something else. He knelt now by the hearth, back to her, stirring a small iron pot over the coals. The smell rose. Bitter herbs, something green and sharp, mixed with the faint sweetness of honey he'd stirred in from the last jar in the pantry. He ladled the brew into a tin cup, steam curling in the lamplight, and carried it to her without a word. "Drink," he said, holding it out. Kate took it, fingers brushing his. Warmth from the cup seeped into her palms. She blew across the surface, watching ripples spread. "What is it?" she asked. "Willow bark, yarrow, a little mint to cut the taste." He stayed kneeling, close enough she could smell the pine smoke on his coat. "For the pain, and the cold still in your bones." She sipped, bitter, then sweet. Heat spread down her throat, loosening the knot in her chest she hadn't realized was there. She set the cup on the arm of the chair. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. "Any of it." He looked at her then. Really looked. "I know." The fire popped. A log shifted, sending sparks up the chimney. Kate stared at the cup in her hands. She'd spent her life proving she didn't need anyone. Patrick had taught her that. Sarah had begged her to remember it. And yet here she was, leg useless, house still standing only because this man, this stranger, had chosen to stay. She hated the gratitude, hated how it felt like weakness. "You've been out there every morning," she said, "before light and back after dark." He shrugged one shoulder. "Work doesn't wait." She almost smiled. Almost. "You sound like my father." Nige didn't answer. He rose, slow, and added another log to the fire. The flames brightened, throwing gold across his face, catching the faint scar along his jaw. Kate watched him move. The careful way he placed the wood. The way his hands, scarred, strong, never shook. She wondered how many winters he'd spent like this, alone, surviving on what he could carry, what he could find. She wondered what had driven him here, to her porch, to her table. She opened her mouth to ask. A sound cut through the quiet, hooves on snow, slow, labored. One horse, coming up the long drive. Kate stiffened. Nietzsche was already at the window, one hand on the frame, peering into the dusk. The rider dismounted with a grunt. Footsteps on the porch. A knock, soft, hesitant. Kate pushed herself up, wincing as weight hit her ankle. "Stay back," she whispered. Nietzsche didn't argue. He stepped into the shadow by the door. Kate limped across the room, opened the latch. Sarah stood there, coat crusted with snow, face pale and drawn under the brim of her hat. Her eyes were red-rimmed, cheeks hollow. She looked 10 years older than when Kate had last seen her. "Kate," she breathed, voice cracking. Kate pulled her inside, shutting the door against the wind. "Sarah, what happened?" Sarah's arms went around her sister, trembling. Kate held her, felt the thinness of her shoulders, the way she shook like a leaf in the gale. "David," Sarah whispered. "The influenza, it took him. And his mother. She said there was no room for me after the funeral. I rode 3 days. I didn't know where else to go." Kate's throat closed. She stroked Sarah's back, smelling road dust and grief. "You're home," she said. "That's where you go." Sarah pulled back, wiping her eyes. Then her gaze slid past Kate, to Nietzsche, standing silent in the lamplight. Her face changed, eyes widened. "An Apache?" The words came out sharp, edged with fear. "Here, in the house?" Kate felt the air tighten. She stepped half in front of Nietzsche, instinctive. "He's helping me. Through the winter. He saved my life in the storm." Sarah stared. "Helping you? Kate, he's Nietzsche," Kate cut in, "and he's staying." Sarah looked between them, mouth open, then closed. She shook her head slowly. "You've lost your mind." Kate felt the old anger rise. Anger at Sarah for judging. Anger at herself for caring what she thought. But underneath it, something else. The fear that Sarah would turn and leave. Take the last piece of family she had left. "Please," Kate said, softer. "Stay, at least tonight. It's too dark, too cold to ride back." Sarah's eyes flicked to Nietzsche again. He hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, just watched, steady. Sarah exhaled, long and shaky. "One night," she said finally. "But we talk tomorrow. Really talk." Kate nodded. "Tomorrow." She helped Sarah out of her coat, led her to the small bedroom off the hall, the one that used to be Patrick's study. When she came back, Nietzsche was still by the fire, staring into the flames. "She's scared," he said quietly. "She's grieving," Kate answered, "and she doesn't know you." He nodded once. "She will." Kate sat again, ankle throbbing. The room felt smaller now, crowded with things unsaid. Sarah's voice drifted from the bedroom, soft, broken sobs muffled by the door. Kate closed her eyes. She thought of Patrick's grave under fresh snow, thought of the ranch, still standing but fragile, thought of Nietzsche, still here, still helping, still watching her like he saw every crack she tried to hide. She opened her eyes. Nietzsche was looking at her. Neither spoke. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind dropped for a moment, long enough for them to hear it clearly. The steady, unmistakable rhythm of many hooves. A lot of hooves, coming up the long drive. Kate's hand went to the rifle leaning against the chair. Nietzsche rose, slow, and moved to the window. The firelight flickered across his face, and in the dark beyond the glass, lanterns bobbed, yellow, cold, coming closer. The snow fell in lazy, fat flakes, drifting past the porch rail like ash from a distant fire. It muffled sound, turned the yard into something soft and deceptive. Kate stood on the top step, coat buttoned to her throat, bad ankle wrapped tight under her boot. The pain had dulled to a low throb, but every shift of weight reminded her how fragile she still was. Behind her, the door stood half open, lamplight spilling out in a thin gold stripe across the snow. Nycha waited just inside the threshold, close enough to step forward if needed, far enough to give her room to speak. Captain Hank Reeves sat his horse at the foot of the steps, flanked by 4 troopers. Their mounts stamped restlessly, breath steaming in white plumes. Reeves wore his uniform crisp despite the cold. Dark blue wool, brass buttons catching the faint porch light. His face was handsome in the way of men who knew it. Square jaw, steady eyes, a mustache trimmed just so, but there was nothing warm in the way he looked at her now. "Miss Harlan," he said, touching the brim of his hat. The courtesy sounded practiced, thin. "Evening." "Captain Reeves." Kate kept her voice level. "Didn't expect company this late. Didn't expect to find you still out here alone." His gaze slid past her shoulder, settling on Nycha. The troopers shifted in their saddles. Subtle, but Kate felt it like a tightening noose. She stepped forward half a pace, blocking the line of sight. "I'm not alone." Reeves smiled, small, cold. "So I see." He leaned forward in the saddle. "We're looking for a deserter scout, half-breed. Tall, Apache features, speaks good English. Looks a lot like your hired hand there." The words landed like stones in still water. Kate felt the ripple go through her. Anger first, hot and bright, then fear underneath it, cold and deep. This wasn't a warning anymore. This was a hunt. She forced her hands to stay loose at her sides. "He's my employee, that's all." The lie tasted sour, same as the one she'd told Jace. But this time it came out steadier. Her fingers trembled only once, hidden in the folds of her coat. Reeves studied her. "Employee?" he repeated, like he was tasting the word. "Funny thing, folks in Cielo Rojo say you've been hiring no one. Say the ranch is running on fumes. Yet here he is, convenient." Kate's jaw tightened. "Folks in Cielo Rojo talk a lot. Doesn't make it true." One of the troopers snorted. Reeves raised a gloved hand. Quiet. His eyes never left Kate's face. "Your father was a respected man," he said slowly. "Patrick Harlan. Good name. Solid. He wouldn't want his daughter tarnished by unfortunate associations." The words hit like a slap. Kate felt heat climb her neck, felt the old wound reopen, Patrick's voice in her memory, rough and proud. "You hold this land, Katie, no matter what they say." She could almost smell the tobacco on his breath, see the way he'd looked at her the last time he rode out, knowing he wouldn't come back. She lifted her chin. "My father taught me to judge by actions, not blood." Reeves's smile faded. For a moment something darker flickered in his eyes. Anger, maybe, or wounded pride. He straightened in the saddle. "Actions," he echoed. "We'll see about actions." He glanced at Nycha again, longer this time. "If your man here is who we think he is, harboring him makes you an accessory. That's a federal matter, Miss Harlan, not a neighborly one." Kate's heart beat hard against her ribs. She pictured the ranch without Nycha, the corrals empty, the roof still leaking, winter closing in like a fist. She pictured him gone, riding off into the snow, hunted, alone. The thought left a hollow ache she didn't want to name. She met Reeves's gaze. "Then you'll need proof, not rumors." Reeves exhaled through his nose, a short, humorless sound. "We'll be back," he said. "With more men. And a warrant." He touched his hat again. Mock courtesy. "Good night, Miss Harlan. Stay warm." He wheeled his horse. The troopers followed, hooves crunching snow, lanterns swinging as they faded down the drive. The flakes kept falling, covering their tracks almost as soon as they made them. Silence returned. Thick, heavy. Kate didn't move until the last light disappeared around the bend. Then she turned. Naicha stepped out onto the porch, closing the door softly behind him. Snow dusted his shoulders, caught in his hair like white feathers. He looked at her, really looked, and she saw the weight in his eyes. "I should leave tonight," he said quietly. The words landed like a blow. Kate felt something crack inside her chest, small, sharp, final. She stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat coming off him in the cold air. Her hand found his, cold fingers wrapping around his warmer ones. She held on, hard. "No," she said. "Not yet." He didn't pull away, didn't speak, just looked down at their joined hands, then back to her face. The snow kept falling, soft, relentless, covering the porch, the steps, the tracks of the soldiers. It covered everything, like it could erase what had just been said. But it couldn't. Inside the house, Sarah's soft footsteps moved toward the window. She had heard. Kate knew she had heard. The wind rose again, low and mournful, and Kate stood there, holding Naicha's hand in the dark, knowing the next time Reeves came, there would be no more lies left to tell. The kitchen lamp burned low, its wick trimmed too short, throwing long shadows that danced across the pine walls like restless ghosts. The stove still held heat from supper, a faint smell of beans and cornbread lingering in the air, mixed with the sharp bite of pine smoke from the open damper. Snow tapped softly against the window panes. Steady, almost gentle now that the worst of the storm had passed. Inside, though, the room felt small, crowded, the three of them sitting around the scarred oak table like suspects waiting for judgment. Kate sat at the head, bad ankle propped on an overturned crate, hands folded tight in her lap to keep them from shaking. Sarah occupied the chair to her right, coat still on, fingers wrapped around a tin mug of tea she hadn't touched. Naicha sat opposite, back straight, elbows on the table, eyes on the grain of the wood as though reading something written there. No one spoke for a long minute. The lamp hissed. The wind sighed against the eaves. Sarah broke the silence first, voice thin but steady. "He came up on the trail yesterday. Captain Reeves, with 3 men. They stopped me near the fork, said they were checking for strays." She swallowed. "He asked about you, Kate. About the ranch. About the Apache you've got working here. Said to be cautious. Said a woman alone can make bad choices when she's desperate." Kate felt the words settle in her stomach like cold lead. She didn't look at Naicha. Didn't need to. She could feel him listening, still as stone, but every muscle coiled. Sarah's eyes flicked to him, then back to Kate. "He knows, doesn't he? Or suspects, and he's not the kind to let it go." Kate exhaled slowly through her nose. She had known this was coming, had felt it in the way Reeves looked at her on the porch, the way his smile hadn't reached his eyes. But hearing it from Sarah made it real, made it close. "I told him Naicha's just a hand," Kate said. "Nothing more." Sarah's mouth tightened. "And he believed you?" "No." The single word hung there. Sarah set her mug down. Too hard. Tea sloshed over the rim. "Kate, what are you doing? If he's what Reeves says, a deserter, a scout who turned, then keeping him here isn't just foolish, it's dangerous. For you, for the ranch, for me, now that I'm here." Kate's fingers dug into her palms. She thought of Patrick's grave under fresh snow, thought of the corrals he'd built with his own hands, the windmill he'd climbed in the rain to fix, the promise he'd made her take. This land is yours, Katie. Hold it. She had held it, through drought, through wolves, through every winter that tried to break her. And now it was slipping because of one man. One choice. She looked at Nietzsche. He hadn't moved, but his eyes lifted to hers, dark, steady, waiting. The truth sat heavy on her tongue. She could still send him away. Tell Sarah it was done. Let him ride out into the night. Let the soldiers find him or the cold take him. The ranch would go on. Sarah would stay. Safety would return. Brittle and cold, but familiar. But the thought of watching him disappear down the snowy trail, of knowing she had chosen the easy road while he paid the price, twisted something deep inside her. She remembered his arms around her in the storm, remembered the warmth of him when everything else was freezing, remembered the quiet way he worked, never asking for thanks, never demanding trust. She couldn't do it. She looked at Sarah. He was a scout for the army. Fort Union. He saw what they did. Villages burned, women and children shot down. He warned his people when he could. Then he left, before they could hang him. Sarah's face went white. She stared at Kate like she'd never seen her before. "And you knew this? The whole time?" "I know it now," Kate said. "I didn't at first, but I know it now." Sarah's breath came short. "Kate, he saved my life," Kate cut in, voice low but fierce. "Twice. Once in the storm. Once by staying when every other man in the territory wouldn't touch this place. He's not a killer. He's a man who chose not to kill." Sarah looked at Nietzsche. Really looked. He met her gaze without flinching. Sarah's shoulders sagged. "What happens when Reeves comes back with that warrant?" Kate didn't answer right away. The lamp flame guttered. Shadows lengthened. "Then we fight," she said finally. "This is my land. Our land. I won't let them take it. Or him." Nietzsche's eyes lifted to hers again. Something flickered there. Worry, maybe gratitude, maybe both. He gave the smallest nod. Sarah exhaled, shaky. "You're going to get us all killed." "Maybe," Kate said, "but I'm not sending him out to die alone." Silence fell again. Thicker, heavier. Sarah pushed back from the table. "I need air," she whispered, and slipped out the back door into the snow. Kate watched her go. The door closed softly. The wind carried the faint crunch of boots on the porch. She looked at Nietzsche. He hadn't moved. But his hands were flat on the table now, fingers spread, as though bracing for something. Kate stood, slow, careful on her bad ankle, and limped around the table. She stopped beside him, close enough to feel the warmth coming off him. "We fight," she repeated softer. "This is my land." He looked up at her. "And mine now?" The question hung there, simple, raw. Kate didn't answer with words. She reached out, touched his shoulder. Just once. Light. Then she turned and walked to the door of the small back room he used. She paused in the doorway. The house settled around them, the fire dying down, the snow whispering against the glass, Sarah's footsteps fading into the night. Kate looked back at Nietzsche. He was watching her. She spoke quietly, so only he could hear. "I have a plan," she said, "but it means no turning back." Nietzsche rose slowly, crossed the room in 3 steps, stopped close enough that she could see the faint pulse at the base of his throat. He lifted a hand, slow, careful, and brushed his knuckles along her cheek. The touch was light, almost hesitant. "Then ask me properly," he said. The lamp flickered once. Outside, the snow kept falling, soft, relentless, covering everything. and in the quiet between them, something shifted. Small, final, and impossible to undo. The small back room smelled of saddle leather and cedar, the faint tang of herbs Nietzsche carried in his pouch still clinging to the air. A single oil lamp burned on the crate that served as a nightstand, its flame low and unsteady, throwing soft, wavering shadows across the rough plank walls. The cot was narrow, barely wide enough for one, covered with a wool blanket patched in places where moths had eaten through. Outside, the wind had dropped to a low moan, snow brushing the window like fingertips testing for weakness. Kate sat on the edge of the cot, bad ankle stretched out in front of her, coat draped over her shoulders against the chill that seeped through the cracks. Nietzsche stood by the door for a moment after she entered, hand still on the latch, as though giving her one last chance to change her mind and leave. When she didn't move, he closed it softly and crossed to sit beside her. Close, but not touching. The mattress dipped under his weight. She felt the warmth of him immediately, steady against the cold that had settled in her bones since the storm. Neither spoke at first. The lamp hissed. The wind sighed. Kate stared at her hands in her lap, calloused, scarred from rope burns and barbed wire, trembling just enough to betray her. She had come here to speak plainly, to lay out the plan she'd turned over in her mind for hours while Sarah slept fitfully in the front room. But now, with him this close, the words felt heavier than she'd expected. Sarah had knocked earlier, soft, urgent, whispering through the door. Soldiers camped nearby, up by the North Ridge. They're watching the trails. Lights in the trees. Her voice had cracked on the last word. Kate had thanked her, told her to go back to bed, but the warning stayed, sharp as a knife edge. Nietzsche's secret wasn't just his anymore. It was Sarah's, too, and the ranch's, and hers. Kate drew a slow breath. Sarah saw them. Reeves's men. They're closer than we thought. Nietzsche nodded once. I felt them. She looked at him then, really looked. The lamplight caught the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, the scar along his jaw that she'd never asked about. He looked tired. Not the kind of tired that came from work, but the deeper kind. The kind that lived behind the eyes after too many nights, wondering if tomorrow would bring a rope or a bullet. I can't let them take you, she said quietly. Not after everything. He studied her face. You could. You should. The words stung. She shook her head. No. Silence again. Longer this time. Kate's throat tightened. She had spent her life building walls, high ones, thick ones, because the alternative was losing what little she had left. Patrick's death had taught her that. Sarah's letters had reminded her. But walls only held for so long against a storm like this. She turned toward him, knee brushing his. You're more than hired hand to me, she said. The confession came out raw, unsteady. You have been since the night you carried me through that blizzard, since you came back for the cattle when you could have ridden away. I don't know when it changed. I just know it did. Nietzsche didn't move, didn't speak, but his eyes, dark, deep, held hers without flinching, and she saw something shift there. Not surprise, but recognition, like he'd known longer than she had. Her hands rose, hesitant, trembling, until her fingers rested against the front of his shirt. The fabric was worn, warm from his body. She felt his heartbeat under her palm, steady, strong, alive. I'm scared, she whispered. Not of Reeves, not of the soldiers, of what this means, of what people will say, of losing the ranch, of losing you. He covered her hand with his, large, rough, careful. I know. She swallowed. If we do this, if we make them believe we're married, it's not just words. It's forever. They'll never let it go. The town won't. My name, my father's name, won't be the same." He nodded slowly. "I know that too." Kate searched his face. "And you'd still do it? For you?" His thumb traced the back of her hand. Slow, deliberate. "Yes." The room seemed to shrink. The lamp flame steadied, as though holding its breath. Kate leaned in, slow, giving him time to pull away. He didn't. Their lips met. Tentative at first, almost careful, like two people testing ground that might give way beneath them. Then deeper. Urgent. Her arms slid around his neck, pulling him closer. His hands found her waist, steadying her as though she might fall even sitting still. The kiss tasted of pine smoke and salt, and something raw she couldn't name. Grief, maybe, or hope, or both. When they parted, foreheads resting together, breath mingling in the cold air, Kate whispered against his mouth, "We make it real." Nietzsche's arms tightened around her. "We make it real." The wind picked up again outside. Low, restless. They stayed like that a long time, wrapped in each other, the lamp burning lower, shadows lengthening across the walls. Eventually, Kate pulled back just enough to look at him. "Tomorrow," she said, "we ride for Pine Creek, before the trails close, before Reeves moves." He nodded. "Tomorrow?" She rested her head against his shoulder. His hand stroked her hair. Slow, gentle, like he was memorizing the feel of it. The house settled around them, the creak of timbers cooling, the soft patter of snow against glass, Sarah's quiet breathing from the front room. Kate closed her eyes. She thought of Patrick's grave, thought of the ranch, still standing but fragile, thought of the life she'd built alone, and the one she might lose by choosing this. She didn't regret it. Not yet. But the fear stayed, quiet, deep, waiting. Outside, the wind dropped for a moment. Then, faint at first, growing steadier, the rhythmic thud of many hooves on frozen ground. Coming closer. Kate's eyes opened. Nietzsche felt her tense. He lifted his head, listening. The hoofbeats slowed, stopped outside the house. Voices, low, clipped, carried on the night air. Kate whispered against his neck, "It's time." Nietzsche's arms tightened once, brief, fierce, then released her. He stood. "No road back now," he said. The lamp flickered, and in the dark beyond the window, lanterns bloomed, yellow, cold, and closing in. The weak winter sun broke through the clouds just long enough to turn the fresh snow into a blinding sheet of white. It glittered on the porch rail, on the sagging fence posts, on the hats and shoulders of the 6 troopers drawn up in a loose half-circle at the foot of the steps. Their horses shifted, hooves crunching frozen crust, breath rising in slow white plumes that drifted and vanished. The air smelled of pine and horse sweat and gun oil, sharp, metallic, wrong in the stillness. Kate stood on the top step, coat open against the sudden brightness, bad ankle braced but bearing weight. Behind her, Nietzsche waited 1 pace back, arms loose at his sides, face calm as carved stone. Sarah stood to Kate's right, chin up, hands clasped tight in front of her skirts to hide their tremble. Captain Hank Reeves dismounted first. His boots hit the snow with a soft crunch. He didn't hurry. Took his time straightening his coat, adjusting the slant of his hat, letting the silence stretch until it felt like a rope pulled taut. When he finally looked up, his eyes went straight to Nietzsche. "We know who he is," Reeves said, voice carrying clear across the yard. "Deserter, traitor, scout who sold out his own people and then ran when the noose got close." The words landed like stones in deep water. Kate felt them ripple through her, anger first, bright and hot, Then the cold certainty that there was no more hiding. The secret she'd guarded for weeks lay bare now, spoken aloud in front of witnesses who carried badges and carbines. One of the troopers muttered something low. Another shifted his rifle across his saddle bow. The horses sensed it, ears flicking, tails switching. Reeves stepped forward, boots deliberate in the snow. "Step aside, Miss Harlan. We're taking him in. Quietly, if you let us. Less quietly, if you don't." Kate's heart slammed against her ribs. She could still back down, could step aside, let them cuff him, watch them ride away with the only man who'd kept this place alive through the worst winter she'd ever seen. The ranch would stand. Sarah would be safe. Her name, Patrick's name, would stay clean. But the thought of Nycha in irons, of the rope waiting at Fort Union, of the ranch empty again, her alone with the wind and the leaks and the graves, twisted something deep inside her until it hurt to breathe. She took one step down, then another, until she stood level with Reeves, close enough to see the faint tick at the corner of his mouth. "That man," she said, voice steady despite the tremor in her hands, "is my husband." The word hung in the cold air. A trooper coughed, sharp, disbelieving. Another whispered something to the man beside him. Reeves's face went still, then flushed dark red under the brim of his hat. "Your husband," he repeated, slow, like he was tasting something bitter. "Yes." Reeves laughed once, short, without humor. "Convenient timing, Miss Harlan. Real convenient." Kate held his gaze. "We married in the storm. A traveling preacher caught here overnight. Sarah was too ill to stand witness then, but she's here now." Sarah stepped forward, chin high despite the pallor in her cheeks. "It's true," she said. Her voice shook only once. "They married right here, in the house. I saw the ring he gave her. Simple silver band. She wears it still." Kate's left hand flexed instinctively. The plain silver band Nycha had slipped onto her finger last night in the lamplight. No ceremony, no words beyond the promise they'd already made. She felt its weight now, cool against her skin, heavier than iron. Reeves's eyes narrowed. He looked from Kate to Sarah to Nycha, then back again. "You expect me to believe that? A white woman and an Apache deserter, married in a blizzard, with no record, no preacher's name, nothing but your word?" "I expect you to believe what's standing in front of you," Kate said, "or prove otherwise, but you'll need more than suspicion and a bad temper to drag a man out of his own home." The troopers shifted again. Uneasy now, one glanced at Reeves, waiting for the order. Reeves's jaw worked. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he spat into the snow, deliberate, angry. "This isn't over," he said. "Not by a long shot. I'll tell the town. I'll tell Richardson. And when the whispers start, when the supply wagons stop coming, when the bank calls in notes, when folks remember what happened to women who crossed the line, you'll wish you'd stepped aside today." He turned, swung up into the saddle with a creak of leather. The troopers followed, horses wheeling, snow kicking up in small white clouds. They rode out without looking back. The porch fell silent. The wind picked up again, carrying the faint jingle of bridles until it faded into nothing. Kate stood there, chest rising and falling, the silver band suddenly heavy on her finger. She felt Sarah's hand on her arm, light, trembling, but couldn't look at her sister yet. Couldn't face the fear in her eyes. Nycha stepped down beside her, close enough that their shoulders brushed. "We're marked now," she said, voice barely above a whisper. He looked at her, long, steady. "Together." The word settled between them, simple and final. Sarah exhaled, a shaky sound, and went back inside without a word, the door closing softly behind her. Kate stared after the soldiers until the last horse vanished around the bend. Snow kept falling. Light, steady, covering their tracks, covering the yard, covering everything like it could erase what had just been said. But it couldn't. She turned to Nietzsche. His face was calm, but she saw the tension at the corners of his mouth, the way his hand rested near the knife at his belt. Not reaching, just ready. They stood there in the cold sunlight, side by side, the ranch quiet around them. And far off, carried on the wind, came the faint, distant sound of another rider approaching. Single, fast, coming from the direction of town. The trail wound narrow and high along the shoulder of the mountain, a faint scar cut into rock and pine that no white man's map bothered to mark. Snow had begun to melt in patches under the weak March sun, turning the path to slick mud and treacherous ice. Kate rode in the middle, mare picking her way with careful steps, every jolt sending a fresh twinge through her healing ankle. The air smelled of wet earth and resin, sharp and clean after weeks of wood smoke and closed rooms. Behind her, Sarah's horse plodded steadily, breath steaming. Ahead, Nietzsche led on his steady bay, eyes scanning the ridgeline, the trees, the sky, always watching. They had left before first light, slipping out the back door while the ranch still slept under frost. Kate had packed light. Saddlebags with hard bread, jerky, a spare blanket, the silver band still on her finger. She'd stood in the front room for a long minute before they rode out, looking at the small things she couldn't take. The carved wooden box Patrick had made for her mother, the faded photograph of the three of them on the mantel, Sarah small between them, all smiling like the world would never change. She'd touched the frame once, thumb brushing dust, then turned away. Some things had to stay behind, so the rest could survive. Now the trail climbed higher, the ranch falling away below them like a memory already fading. Kate kept her eyes forward, but her thoughts circled back. Reeves's parting words still ringing, the way the town would hear soon enough, the way Richardson's men would circle like wolves once the whispers started. She felt the weight of it all pressing on her shoulders, heavier than the saddlebags. This wasn't just about saving Nietzsche anymore. It was about saving what little was left of her family's name, her father's dream, the ground under her feet. Sarah rode close behind, silent since dawn. Every so often Kate glanced back, saw the tight set of her sister's mouth, the way her hands gripped the reins too hard. Sarah had said almost nothing since the soldiers left yesterday, only once, as they saddled the horses in the dark. "If this goes wrong, Kate, we lose everything." Kate hadn't answered. There was nothing safe to say. Nietzsche reined in at a switchback, raising a hand. The three of them stopped. Below, in a narrow valley half hidden by timber, orange pinpoints flickered. Campfires. Distant voices carried on the wind, too faint to make words, but the rhythm was unmistakable. Soldiers. Patrolling. Waiting. Kate's stomach twisted. "They're watching the main trails," she whispered. Nietzsche nodded once. "They know we're moving, but they don't know this way." He turned his horse onto a fainter track, barely a game path, overgrown with scrub pine and loose shale. They followed in single file, the going slower now, horses breathing hard. The sun climbed higher, melting more snow, turning the trail to sucking mud. Kate's mare slipped once. She caught herself on the horn, heart lurching. She thought of turning back, of riding down to the ranch, facing Reeves's warrant, letting him take what he wanted. But the thought of Nietzsche in chains, of the ranch claimed by Baxter, of Sarah left with nothing, stopped her cold. No road back, not anymore. They rode for hours. The air grew thinner, sharper. Pines gave way to open rock slopes dotted with stunted juniper. The sun was past noon when Nietzsche pulled up again. Sharp, sudden. 3 riders materialized from the trees ahead, blocking the path. Apache. Buckskin leggings, trade blankets over their shoulders, faces painted with ochre and ash. Rifles rested across their saddles, not raised, but ready. The leader was older, broad across the chest, a single eagle feather tied in his hair. Tall pine. He spoke first, voice low, carrying over the wind. Nietzsche, you bring a white wife through our lands. Kate felt the words like a hand on her throat. She eased her mare forward until she was level with Nietzsche. Sarah stayed back, breath shallow. Nietzsche answered in the same tongue, quick, calm, then switched to English for her benefit. Tall pine. We ask passage. Soldiers watch the lower trails. We mean no harm. Tall Pine's eyes moved to Kate, slow, measuring. Then to Sarah, who sat rigid, hands white on the reins. He spoke again, English this time, accented but clear. You ride with women. Won your wife, they say. The stories from the settlements reach even here. Few believed them. Kate met his gaze. Her heart hammered, but she kept her voice even. The stories are true. I am Kate Harlan. This is my sister, Sarah Kane. We ask only to pass. We ride to Pine Creek. Tall Pine studied her a long moment. The wind moved through the junipers, whispering secrets. His companions watched, silent. Finally he nodded. Once, curt. You will come with us. The elders will want to speak with you. Nietzsche's shoulders tightened, just a fraction. Kate felt it more than saw it. We are expected in Pine Creek, Nietzsche said. The White Town will still be there tomorrow, Tall Pine answered. Tonight you are with your people. Your wife should see where you come from. The word wife landed like a stone in still water. Kate felt heat rise in her cheeks, felt Sarah's sharp intake of breath behind her. Tall Pine turned his horse. His men followed. Nietzsche looked at Kate, long, searching. She nodded once. They fell in behind the Apache riders, the trail narrowing again, leading deeper into the mountains. The sun dropped lower, shadows stretching long across the rock. Kate rode with her chin up, but inside she felt the fear coil tighter. Fear for Sarah, caught in a world not her own. Fear for Nietzsche, returning to people who might not welcome him back. Fear for herself, riding into a place where she would always be the outsider. The trail curved around a shoulder of stone. Below them, hidden until now, a valley opened, smoke rising from lodges, horses grazing, children's voices carrying faint on the wind. Tall Pine reined in at the rim. The elders will decide, he said. Kate looked at Nietzsche. His face was unreadable, but she saw the tension in the set of his jaw, the way his hand rested on the horn like he was bracing for a fall. She reached across the space between their horses, slow, careful, and touched his arm. Will they accept us? She whispered. Nietzsche covered her hand with his. He didn't answer right away, just looked down at the camp, at the smoke curling into the cold blue sky. Then he said, quiet enough for only her to hear, We'll know soon. The wind rose again, carrying the scent of pinon smoke and distant horses, and below them the valley waited, silent, watchful, deciding. The valley opened below them like a hidden breath held too long. Smoke rose thin and blue from the low lodges scattered among the pines, canvas and pole, some with brush roofs, all tucked against the curve of the mountain where the wind couldn't reach so easily. Horses grazed in small bunches, tails switching against flies. Children paused in their running games to stare, dark eyes wide and curious. Women looked up from tanning hides or grinding corn, hands stilling. The smell hit Kate first. Wood smoke, roasting meat, sage drying in bundles, the faint earthy musk of tanned leather and horse sweat. It was alive in a way the ranch never felt anymore. Raw, constant, unapologetic. They dismounted at the edge of the camp. Tall Pine gestured for them to follow on foot. Kate's ankle protested with every step on the uneven ground, but she kept her chin up, refusing to limp in front of strangers. Sarah walked close beside her, shoulders hunched, eyes darting from face to face. Naicha moved ahead, greeting people with quiet nods. Some returned them, some looked away. Kate saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his hand never strayed far from the knife at his belt. This was home, but it wasn't safe. They were led to the central fire pit, flames low and steady under an iron kettle. An old woman sat on a folded blanket, silver hair braided with red cloth strips, hands busy with a basket of dried herbs. She didn't rise when they approached. Her eyes, sharp, dark, missing nothing, lifted to Naiche first. "Naiche," she said, voice low and rough like wind through dry grass. "Son of my daughter's husband, you have been away too long." He inclined his head. "Morning Star, the mountains have missed your voice." She studied him a moment longer, then her gaze shifted to Kate and Sarah. "These are the white women who travel with you. Won your wife, they say." Naicha stepped half aside so Kate stood forward. "This is Kate Harlan, my wife in all but the final words. This is her sister, Sarah Kane." Morning Star rose slowly, graceful despite her age, and approached. She stopped close enough that Kate could see the fine lines etched around her mouth, the faint scent of sage and cedar coming off her blanket. The old woman reached out, touched Kate's copper hair with dry fingertips. Gentle, almost reverent. "You have survived a hard winter," she said, "and found more than you expected in it." Kate swallowed. "Naicha saved my life, twice." Morning Star's eyes flicked to Naicha. "And you saved his from the bluecoats. We hear things, even here." She gestured to the blankets around the fire. "Sit, eat, rest. The night is cold." Kate hesitated, only a heartbeat, then lowered herself carefully, bad ankle stretched out. Sarah sat beside her, knees drawn up, arms wrapped tight around herself. Naicha took the place opposite, close enough to the old woman that their shoulders nearly touched. Food came without ceremony. Roasted venison, flat bread baked on hot stones, a stew thick with roots and berries. Kate ate slowly, tasting unfamiliar spices, the meat rich and smoky. Sarah picked at hers, eyes down. The warriors who had escorted them stood at a respectful distance, watching. Children crept closer, peering from behind legs and lodge poles. Kate felt every gaze like a weight. Curious, wary, judging. She was the outsider here, the pale woman with red hair and a limp, sitting in a circle that had never belonged to her kind. Morning Star broke the quiet. "The bluecoats push deeper every season. They hunt us like animals, drive us to places with no water, no game. They call it reservation. We call it a cage." Her voice carried no anger, only weariness, old as the mountains themselves. Kate felt Naicha tense beside her. The words landed close to his own story. The villages burned, the warnings he'd given, the price he'd paid for refusing to lead soldiers to slaughter. Morning Star looked at Kate. "You ride with him. You carry his name now. What do you know of this?" Kate set her bowl down. The fire popped, sending sparks upward. She thought of Patrick, his grave under snow, his voice telling her to hold the land no matter what. She thought of the ranch, still standing because Naicha had stayed. She thought of Sarah beside her, silent and afraid. "I know my father built something on land that wasn't always his," she said quietly. "He taught me to fight for it, Not with guns, not always. With staying, with not running when it hurt. Her voice cracked once. I lost him last fall. I won't lose this too. Morningstar listened without interrupting. When Kate finished, the old woman nodded slowly. You speak of loss like you know it, she said. That is something we understand. Sarah shifted, small, uncomfortable. Morningstar's gaze moved to her. And you, sister of the fire-haired woman, you ride with them. Why? Sarah's throat worked. Because she's all I have left, she whispered, and because I'm tired of losing. Morningstar studied her a long moment. Then she reached into her basket, pulled out a small pouch of herbs, and placed it in Sarah's hands. For the grief, she said, and for the road ahead. Sarah took it, fingers trembling. Thank you. The fire burned lower. Warriors drifted away. Children were called to lodges. Morningstar rose, joints creaking faintly. You will stay tonight, she said. Not a question. Rest. Tomorrow is soon enough for your journey. Kate looked at Nietzsche. He gave the smallest nod. We'll stay, she said. Morningstar inclined her head, then turned toward a larger lodge. Before she went, she paused, looking back at Kate. What if he needs to roam again? She asked. The blood in him is restless, like his father, like the eagle that mates for life but flies alone when the seasons call. Kate felt the question settle deep. She thought of Nietzsche's eyes in the lamplight last night, the way he'd held her like something precious but fragile. She thought of the ranch, her anchor, her prison, her home. We'll find our way, she said. One season at a time. Morningstar's mouth curved, just a hint of a smile. Then she walked away, blanket trailing in the dust. The fire crackled. Sarah leaned against Kate's shoulder, exhausted. Nietzsche stared into the flames, face unreadable. Kate watched him. She felt the weight of the day, the trail, the eyes, the words spoken aloud. She felt the fear, too. Fear that this place might reject them. Fear that the soldiers would find them before Pine Creek. Fear that the life she'd chosen would cost more than she could pay. She reached across the fire, slow, careful, and touched his hand. He turned it palm up, laced his fingers through hers. The camp quieted around them, lodges glowing with low fires, voices murmuring in Chiricahua, horses nickering softly. Sarah's breathing evened into sleep against Kate's arm. Nietzsche looked at Kate across the dying flames. Tomorrow, he said quietly. She nodded. The stars came out, cold, sharp, endless, and far off, in the dark beyond the valley rim, a faint orange glow flickered. Another patrol fire, closer than it should have been. Nietzsche's grip tightened once. Then he let go, but the glow stayed, watching, waiting. The little wooden church in Pine Creek stood alone at the edge of town, its steeple dark against the star-pricked sky. No bell rang, no lanterns burned outside. Only a single candle glowed through the narrow window beside the door, faint as a dying ember. Kate pushed the latch open with her shoulder, the hinges giving a soft, reluctant creak. Inside, the air smelled of old pine and candle wax, cold stone, and the faint sweetness of beeswax left too long in the sun. The pews were empty, shadows pooling between them like spilled ink. Reverend Elias Ford waited at the altar rail, a tall man in a plain black coat, white hair thinning at the crown. He held a Bible in one hand, a kerosene lamp in the other. The light caught the lines on his face. Deep, patient, the kind that came from too many funerals and not enough weddings. He looked up as they entered, eyes going first to Kate, then Nietzsche, then Sarah, who lingered near the door like she might still turn and run. "You're late," he said quietly, but I waited. Kate stepped forward, boots scuffing the worn floorboards. Her ankle ached with every step, but she refused to limp. Nietzsche walked beside her, close, steady, his hand brushing hers once, brief, grounding. Sarah followed, clutching her shawl like armor. Ford set the lamp on the rail. "Reeves has been here," he said without preamble. "2 days ago, asking questions. A white woman traveling with an Apache man. Said if anyone helped you, they'd answer for it. Said the ranch might not be safe much longer if word got to Baxter." Kate felt the words settle like cold lead in her stomach. She thought of the ranch, the porch where Patrick used to sit with his pipe, the barn where she'd learned to mend harness, the grave behind it all. She thought of Reeves's face when she'd called Nietzsche her husband. She thought of the whispers that would spread now, the supplies that might stop coming, the banknotes Baxter could call in with one word. "We're here to make it real," she said. "No more lies, no more hiding." Ford studied her a long moment. Then he looked at Nietzsche. "And you? This is your choice too?" Nietzsche met his eyes. "It is." Ford nodded once, slow, final. "Then come forward." They stepped to the rail. Sarah moved to stand beside them, hands clasped tight, eyes shining in the candlelight. Ford opened the Bible, but he didn't read from it. Instead, he spoke from memory, voice low and steady. "Marriage is not a shield against the world. It's a promise made in the face of it. You know the cost. You've felt it already. But if you're sure—" Kate looked at Nietzsche. His face was calm, but she saw the flicker in his eyes, the same fear she carried. Fear of what this would cost Sarah. Fear of what the town would do. Fear that the ranch might burn before they could save it. She felt the silver band on her finger. Simple, plain, heavier than gold. "I'm sure," she said. Nietzsche nodded. "We both are." Ford exhaled. "Then let's do this properly." He motioned them closer. The lamp flame steadied, throwing soft gold across their faces. Kate spoke first, voice quiet but clear. "I, Kate Harlan, take you, Nietzsche, as my husband. I promise to walk beside you through all seasons, to honor your spirit and your heritage, to build a home with you that welcomes all parts of who we are. As the land endures through winter and summer alike, so will my love for you remain constant and true." The words came from somewhere deep, words she'd turned over in the dark hours, words that tasted of loss and hope at once. She felt them settle in her chest, irrevocable. Nietzsche looked at her, really looked, and when he spoke, his voice was low, rough with something unspoken. "I, Nietzsche, take you, Kate Harlan, as my wife. I promise to be your shelter in the storm, your companion on the journey, your equal partner in all things. As the eagle mates for life, returning always to the same nest, so will I return always to you, no matter how far I may roam. My heart has found its home in you, and there it will remain until I walk the spirit path." The last words hung in the quiet. Sarah made a small sound, half sob, half sigh. Ford closed the Bible. "Then before God and this witness, I pronounce you husband and wife." He didn't say, "You may kiss." He didn't need to. Nietzsche turned to her. His hand came up, slow, careful, and cupped her cheek. She leaned into it, eyes closing for a heartbeat. Then he kissed her. Gentle at first, then deeper, like something long held back, finally breaking free. Her arms went around his neck. His wrapped her waist. The kiss tasted of pine smoke and salt and the faint sweetness of the herbs he always carried. It lasted longer than it should have in a church at midnight, but neither cared. When they parted, foreheads resting together, Ford cleared his throat. "I'll backdate the papers. A traveling preacher caught in the storm. No one will question it. Not yet." Kate nodded, throat tight. "Thank you." Ford looked at her, long, searching. "You know this won't be easy. Society doesn't forgive unions like this. Not here. Not now." "I know," she said. He handed her the folded certificate, ink still wet in places. She folded it carefully, tucked it inside her coat. They stepped outside into the cold. The night air bit sharp against flushed skin. Stars burned bright overhead. Sarah walked ahead, giving them space, her shoulders straighter than they'd been in days. Nige took Kate's hand as they mounted. "We ride hard," he said. "Before dawn." She nodded. They turned the horses toward the ranch trail. Hidden paths, high ridges, away from the patrols. The moon rose thin and cold, silvering the snow. Kate felt the ring on her finger. Real now, not just a promise. She felt the weight of it, the cost of it, the hope buried under the fear. They rode in silence for hours. The trail climbed, then dropped. The air grew colder as they neared the valley. Then, faint at first, then unmistakable, smoke on the wind. Not campfire smoke, thicker, darker. Kate reined in. Nige did the same. Sarah pulled up behind them. They looked down the long slope toward home. A thin column of black rose from the direction of the ranch. Too steady, too dark for a chimney fire. Kate's heart lurched. "Something's wrong," she whispered. Nige's jaw tightened. He stared at the smoke, eyes narrowing. The wind carried the faint, bitter scent of burning wood. And somewhere in the dark below, a horse whinnied, sharp, frightened. They sat there a long moment, motionless. Then Nige spoke, voice low. "We go careful." Kate nodded, but her hand tightened on the reins until the leather creaked, and the smoke kept rising, slow, relentless against the moonlit sky. The ridge above the Harlan ranch caught the last gray light of day, turning the snow patches to dull silver. Kate crouched behind a flat boulder, breath shallow, the cold stone biting through her coat. Nige knelt to her left, body low, one hand resting on the rock's edge like he could feel the ground's pulse. Sarah pressed close on Kate's right, face pale, eyes wide and wet. Below them the valley opened, familiar, intimate, ruined. Smoke rose thick and black from the stable, flames licking the roof beams, orange tongues against the dusk. The house still stood, but its windows glowed with lantern light that didn't belong. Harsh, moving, men's shadows crossing the glass. Horses stamped in the yard, saddled and restless. Reeves's troopers moved with purpose, carbines slung, while Baxter's men, rougher, civilian, herded the remaining cattle toward the south fence line. Lowing carried up the slope, panicked and hoarse. Kate felt the sight like a fist in her chest. The stable, Patrick's pride, the place where he'd taught her to shoe a horse at 10, where she'd cried the night he died, was gone. Flames ate the timbers he'd cut himself, sparks drifting up like the last of his voice. She tasted ash on the wind, smelled burning pine and hay. Her eyes burned, but no tears came. Not yet. Nige's hand found hers, brief, hard squeeze, then let go. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Sarah's breath hitched. "They're taking the cattle," she whispered. "All of them." Kate watched a trooper kick open the barn door wider, another drag out a saddle. Her father's old rig, the one with the tooled leather she used to trace with her fingers as a child. It hit the dirt. A Baxter hand laughed, short, ugly. Reeves stepped out of the house, coat open, hat pushed back. He carried a sheaf of papers, waved them at one of his men. His voice carried clear on the cold air. "Abandoned property," he called. "Miss Harlan's run off with her Apache. Territory laws clear. Unoccupied land reverts. Baxter's claim gets priority once the paperwork's filed." A trooper answered something Kate couldn't hear. Reeves laughed, cold, satisfied. Sarah made a small sound, hand over her mouth. "We've lost everything." Kate felt the words settle deep, heavy as lead shot. Everything. Patrick's sweat in the beams, his laughter in the corrals, the quiet mornings when the world felt possible. Gone, burned or stolen while she hid on a ridge like a fugitive. She thought of turning back time, of never letting Nietzsche stay, never kissing him in that back room, never standing on the porch and calling him husband. She could have stepped aside, could have saved the ranch, kept her name clean, kept Sarah safe. But the thought of Nietzsche gone, hanged or shot or simply vanished, twisted worse than the smoke in her lungs. She looked at him now. His face was carved from stone, eyes fixed on the fire below. But she saw the muscle jump in his jaw, the way his fingers flexed against the rock. "We could go down," she whispered. "Fight them. Take back what's ours." Nietzsche turned his head slowly. 6 soldiers, 8 of Baxter's men, rifles. We have 3, and you're limping. "I know." He held her gaze. "We die. They win. We live. We come back." Kate's throat closed. She looked down again. A trooper tossed another armload of tack onto the growing pile. Blankets, tools, the old lantern Patrick had carried every night to check the stock. It shattered when it hit the ground. Sarah's hand found Kate's arm, cold fingers digging in. "Kate, please." Kate closed her eyes a second, felt the wind on her face, smelled the smoke, heard the cattle bawl as they were driven off, felt the ring on her finger. Real now, paid for in blood and lies. She opened her eyes. "We go," she said, voice low, cracked. "We hide. We wait." Nietzsche nodded once. Sarah exhaled, shaky, relieved, ashamed. They backed away from the ridge, slow, careful not to silhouette against the sky. Horses waited in the draw below, tied short. Nietzsche helped Kate mount, hand steady under her elbow, careful of the ankle. She bit her lip against the pain. Sarah mounted without a word, eyes fixed on the smoke rising behind them. They turned the horses up slope, away from the ranch, toward the high trails that led back to the Apache Valley. The sun dropped behind the peaks, shadows stretching long and cold. Kate rode last. Every few minutes she twisted in the saddle, looked back. The smoke column thickened, black against the dying light. Flames outlined the stable's skeleton. Voices carried faint. Laughter, orders, the crack of breaking wood. She felt something tear inside. Quiet, final. Not rage. Not yet. Just grief. Deep and dull. For the place she'd sworn to hold. Nietzsche rode beside her now, close enough their knees brushed. He didn't speak. Didn't need to. Sarah rode ahead, shoulders hunched, silent. They climbed higher. The ranch fell away below, a glowing wound in the dark. Kate looked back one last time. Smoke still rose, steady, accusing. She turned forward. Nietzsche spoke, soft, almost lost in the wind. "Land endures," he said, but the fight just started. Kate stared at the trail ahead, rock and snow and shadow. She felt the ring on her finger, felt the ache in her ankle, felt the hollow where the ranch used to be. She whispered more to herself than anyone, "I'll come back, or die trying." The words hung there, small, fierce, unfinished. Nietzsche reached across the space between their horses. His hand found hers, cold fingers lacing through hers, holding on. They rode on. Behind them, the smoke kept rising, slow, relentless, into the gathering dark. And somewhere far below, a dog barked once, sharp, frightened, then fell silent. The Apache camp lay quiet under a moon thin as a blade, the central fire reduced to a nest of red coals that pulsed like a slow heartbeat. Smoke drifted upward in lazy spirals, carrying the scent of pinon resin and roasted venison. Kate sat cross-legged on a folded blanket beside Morning Star, the old woman's hands busy with a bundle of dried roots she sorted by feel in the near dark. The firelight caught the silver in her braids and the faint scars on her knuckles, marks of a life lived hard and long. Across the circle, Sarah knelt near Soft Rain, the young widow with quiet eyes and steady hands. Soft Rain showed her how to crush yarrow leaves between two flat stones, the sharp herbal smell rising between them. Sarah's fingers moved hesitantly at first, awkward, city-soft, then steadier as the rhythm took hold. She hadn't spoken much since they'd returned from Pine Creek, but her shoulders had lost some of their hunch. Kate watched her sister's face in the fire glow. Grief still there, but softened by the small act of doing something useful. Nietzsche sat farther off with Tall Pine and two other warriors, voices low, the cadence of Chiricahua rising and falling like wind through pines. Kate couldn't follow the words, but she felt the weight of them. The way Nietzsche's posture shifted when they spoke of soldiers, of reservation lines creeping closer, of patrols that no longer stopped at the old boundaries. Morning Star broke the quiet between them. The Bluecoats push deeper into our lands every moon. Your ranch is just the start. They take what they want, call it law. When they finish with us, they'll finish with you. Kate stared into the coals. The words landed heavy, stirring the ache she'd carried since the ridge. The smoke rising from the stable, the cattle driven off, Patrick's grave left unguarded. She thought of the silver band on her finger, the certificate folded inside her saddlebag, the promise she'd made in that little church. It had felt like armor then. Now it felt like a brand. "I know," she said softly. "I saw it burning." Morning Star nodded, slow. "And yet you came back to us. Not to hide. To wait." Kate's throat tightened. "I don't know how to wait. My father never waited. He fought, built, held." The old woman set the roots aside. "Your father is gone. You carry his blood, but you carry more now. His name, his land, and his child's child, if the spirits allow." Kate's hand drifted to her stomach. Flat still, but the possibility there, fragile as new ice. She hadn't told anyone yet, not even Nietzsche. The thought of a child born between worlds, of carrying Harlan blood into a future that might reject it, made her chest ache with something too big for words. Morning Star watched her. "You fear losing the line, the name, the story." Kate nodded once. "If we don't take it back, it ends with me." The old woman reached out, laid a dry hand on Kate's wrist. "Stories don't end with land. They end when no one remembers them. You remember. Your sister remembers. He remembers." She nodded toward Nietzsche. "That is enough to start again." Kate looked across the fire. Nietzsche had finished speaking. Tall Pine clapped his shoulder once, then rose. Nietzsche stayed seated, staring into the coals. The firelight carved shadows under his eyes. He hadn't slept much since the ranch burned. None of them had. A sound came from the far edge of camp, hooves on frozen ground, slow, deliberate. Kate tensed. Nietzsche rose in one fluid motion, hand near his knife. Tall Pine stepped forward, rifle loose in his grip. A single rider emerged from the trees. An older white man in a heavy coat, hat low, no uniform. He reined in at the camp's edge, hands visible, voice carrying clear. "Judge Harlan Wade," he called. "Looking for Kate Harlan. Heard she might be here." Kate stood, slow, careful. Nitch moved to her side without a word. Morningstar watched, silent. Wade dismounted, boots crunching frost. He looked older than she remembered. Gray at the temples, lines deeper around the mouth. But the eyes were the same. Sharp, tired, honest. Patrick had trusted him once. That was enough. "Judge," Kate said. He touched his hat brim. "Miss Harlan, or Mrs. Nitch, I suppose." His gaze flicked to Nitch, measuring, not hostile. "I came as soon as I could. Reeves has been recalled. Washington finally listened. Turns out he and Baxter were colluding, forging claims, burning out small holders, taking the land for themselves. It's been happening for years. Reeves was just the boldest." Kate felt the air leave her lungs. "Recalled?" "On his way east under guard. Baxter's fighting the charges, but the evidence is piling up. The ranch is still yours, legally, but it's in bad shape. Stables gone, house ransacked, cattle scattered. You'll have to rebuild from ash." Sarah stepped forward, voice small. "We can go back?" Wade looked at her. "You can, but it won't be the same. Folks in Cielo Rojo heard the stories. Married an Apache, harbored a deserter. Some will help, most won't. And Baxter's still got lawyers. He'll drag it out." Kate stared at the coals. Relief came first. Thin, sharp. Then the deeper ache. The ranch waiting. Broken. Hers but not whole. She thought of Patrick's grave. Snow-covered, alone. Thought of the child she might carry, growing up in a place that would always look at them sideways. She looked at Nitch. He met her eyes. Steady. Waiting. "We rebuild," she said, "but it won't be the same." Nitch nodded once. "No, it won't." Morningstar watched them both. Tall Pine stepped closer, listening. Wade cleared his throat. "I'll file the papers. Get the claim reinstated. But you'll need to show up in Santa Fe soon. Prove you're still there. Still fighting." Kate exhaled. "We will." Wade mounted again, tipped his hat. "Take care, Kate. Your father was a good man. He'd be proud." He rode out into the dark, hoofbeats fading. The fire popped. Sarah sat again, hands clasped tight. Naicha stayed standing, looking toward the valley mouth where the ranch lay miles away. Kate moved to him. She touched his arm. Light. Careful. "We rebuild," she repeated. He looked down at her. "Together." The word settled between them. Simple, worn, true. Sarah watched from the fire, eyes shining. Morningstar rose slowly, blanket around her shoulders. The camp quieted. Lodges dark now, only the central fire left burning low. Kate felt the weight of it all, the lost stable, the scattered cattle, the child not yet born. The name Harlan now tied forever to Nitch's. She felt the fear, too. Fear that Baxter would win anyway. Fear that the town would never forgive. Fear that the life she'd chosen would cost Sarah everything. She looked at Nitch again. He reached out, slow, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. The fire burned lower, and far off, carried on the night wind, came the faint, unmistakable sound of riders, many riders moving along the lower trails. Nitch's hand stilled. Kate's breath caught. The sound grew closer. Steady. Purposeful. Then it faded. But the echo lingered, watching, waiting. The coals pulsed once, red and deep, and in the silence that followed, Kate knew the next fight was already coming. The new Harlan ranch woke slow under a spring sun still pale from winter. The rebuilt house stood smaller than before. 2 rooms instead of 4, roof pitched steep against snow, porch boards planed fresh but already silvering in the light. The stable was half its old size, walls of salvaged timber and new pine, smelling of resin and cut cedar. The corrals held fewer cattle now, but the garden beside the house had taken root. Rows of corn, beans climbing poles, apple saplings staked against the wind. Kate stood on the porch steps, one hand on the rail, the other resting low on the swell of her belly. The baby moved inside her. Small, insistent kicks that made her breath catch every time. Sarah leaned against the post beside her, arms folded, watching the same view. The orchard they'd planted last fall showed green buds now, fragile against the mountain backdrop. Sarah's hair was longer, tied back with a strip of red cloth Morning Star had given her months ago. She looked older, lines at her eyes that hadn't been there before, but steadier too. "Apples might make it this year," Sarah said quietly. "If the late frost holds off." Kate nodded. Pa always wanted fruit trees. The words hung there, soft. Neither looked at the spot behind the house where the old grave still stood, untouched, unmarked except by stones Nietzsche had carried up from the creek. They didn't need to look. It was always there. Hooves sounded on the trail, slow, familiar. Kate straightened. Nietzsche rode in from the north ridge, rifle across his saddle, a brace of rabbits tied behind. His coat was dusted with pine needles, hair tied back with the same leather strip he'd worn the day he appeared at her gate. He dismounted in the yard, swung the rabbits down, and looked up at the porch. His eyes found Kate first, lingering on the curve of her belly, the way her hand cradled it. Something softened in his face, small but real. He crossed the yard in long strides, boots quiet on the new grass. "Morning," he said, voice low. "Morning," Kate answered. She stepped down to meet him, slow, careful. He reached her in 2 steps, hand brushing her arm, then settling at the small of her back. "You're back early," she said. "Game was moving low today." He glanced at Sarah, nodded once. "Morning, Sarah." Sarah managed a small smile. "Morning, Nietzsche." He untied the rabbits, hung them from a hook under the eaves. Kate watched him. Efficient, quiet, the same way he'd moved through her barn that first winter. But now the movements carried something else. Belonging. Not complete, not easy, but real. A soft footfall came from the trail. Morning Star appeared around the bend, walking slow with a young girl at her side, Soft Rain's daughter carrying a woven basket. The old woman wore her blanket over one shoulder, silver hair catching the sun. She stopped at the yard's edge, eyes sweeping the rebuilt house, the garden, the 3 of them on the porch. "Firebird," she said to Kate, "you grow round with life." Kate touched her belly again. "Almost time?" Morning Star approached, steps deliberate. The girl hung back, shy. Morning Star reached out, laid a hand on Kate's stomach, dry palm warm through the fabric. The baby kicked once, hard. Morning Star's mouth curved. "Child of 2 worlds," she said, "but the world will not be kind." The words landed quiet, heavy. Kate felt them settle in her bones. She thought of the child growing inside her. Harlan blood, Apache blood, caught between. She thought of the stares that would follow, the whispers in Cielo Rojo, the questions that would come when the child asked why some doors closed when they walked by. Morning Star withdrew her hand. "We come to bless, to give the child a name in our way, if you allow." Kate looked at Nietzsche. He nodded, small, certain. "We allow," she said. Morningstar gestured to the girl, who stepped forward with the basket. Herbs, feathers, a small pouch of red earth. Soft Rain joined them, carrying a bundle of sage. They moved to the porch steps, forming a loose circle around Kate. Sarah stood close, watching, eyes shining. The blessing was simple. No long chants, no ceremony Kate recognized. Morningstar spoke in Chiricahua first, then English. Words about strength, about roots that grow deep in hard soil, about a heart that could hold two worlds without breaking. She touched Kate's forehead with red earth, then Naicha's, then Sarah's. The sage was lit, smoke curling sweet and sharp. The baby kicked again, as though answering. When it was done, Morningstar stepped back. "You have rebuilt," she said. "Smaller. But yours." Kate looked around, at the house, the garden, the mountains beyond. The ranch was alive again, but different. Fewer cattle. Less land. Baxter had kept a corner through lawyers, even after Reeves fell. The stable still smelled new, not of old hay and Patrick's pipe tobacco. The grave behind it was quieter now, but no less lonely. She touched her belly. "We won," she said softly, "but paid with blood." Sarah heard. She stepped closer, voice low. "Father would be proud, but he'd grieve what we lost." Kate nodded. The ache was there, always there. She felt Naicha's hand on her back, steady, warm. He leaned in, mouth near her ear. "Home is you," he said, "not just land." The words sank deep. She turned her face into his shoulder for a moment, breathing him in. Pine, leather, the faint smoke from the blessing fire. The sun climbed higher. Morningstar and the others prepared to leave. Horses saddled, baskets tied. Sarah walked with Soft Rain a little way down the trail, talking quietly about herbs, about healing. Kate stood on the porch again, Naicha beside her. The valley lay peaceful below. Garden green, horses grazing, smoke rising thin from the chimney. She looked toward the mountains. The wind came up, ruffling the new leaves on the apple trees, carrying the scent of turned earth and distant snow. Kate rested her hand on her belly. The baby moved. Slow. Deliberate. She whispered almost to herself, "Some fights leave scars that never heal." Naicha heard. He didn't answer right away. Just stood with her, shoulder to shoulder, watching the same horizon. The wind rose again, low, restless, moving through the new garden, through the open valley, carrying the sound of distant hoofbeats. Faint, steady, coming closer. Kate's hand tightened on the rail. Naicha's eyes narrowed toward the trail. The hoofbeats grew, slow, purposeful. Then they stopped. Silence fell, thick, waiting. The mountains watched, and in the quiet, Kate knew the next shadow was already moving towards them. "Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening, and for allowing this story to speak to your heart. The Wild West still holds countless truths, some painful, some tender, all worth remembering. Stay with us, subscribe, comment, and invite others to discover these untamed stories, from our hearts to yours. Thank you for being part of this journey. Aviso legal, barra disclaimer. Each story shared here is produced for storytelling enjoyment. Certain scenes may include fictional or dramatized elements inspired by historical circumstances. Although AI tools assist us in visuals, narration, and script development, the emotional tone, editing, and quality control are conducted by people to ensure meaningful experiences. We fully uphold YouTube's policies, using no deceptive recreations or impersonations of real individuals. All creative resources are properly licensed. Unauthorized copying, re-uploading, or remixing is not permitted. Thank you for supporting the effort behind every episode we create.